3 months ago, I was home alone when someone rang the bell of my house. My parents were not at home, and I haven't invited anyone else. So I wondered whether I should open the door or not. My friends never come unannounced to my house. It was 10 p.m., so it was dark and quite creepy. Yet I was extremely curious to see who came to visit me late that night. Finally, I decided to check who it was. I opened the door and saw a young and especially handsome man. I was stunned. I truly believe that this was the mysterious prince that I have been waiting for all my life. In just 2 minutes, I came up with hundreds of theories of why he is here. Can you relate to the imagination of a 20-year-old single girl? Nonetheless, I wasn't able to say a word. I was overwhelmed by his tall figure and deep blue-eyed look. So we both were just looking at each other. And you won't believe what happened next. Before I continue my story, I'd like to remind you to like and subscribe to My Story Animated to follow the rest of my adventures. My mysterious prince introduced himself. However, he came with the lamest excuse on the planet. He said, "Sorry to bother you, but my tire blew out. Are you alone or is there anyone that may help me?" I guess he was referring to my dad or another stronger figure. Anyhow, here's when I got scared. Reality hit me and I suddenly became aware that he can rob me, kidnap me, or even do something worse. And I am sure that he noticed the change in my attitude. I was as pale as a cloth. To calm me, he took a step back on the porch and decided to spill the truth. He said, "I'm not going to hurt you, but I need you to listen to me." I was about to slam the door in his face, but something kept me waiting. So I decided to hear what he had to say. He began the story by explaining that he was looking for me for months. However, he didn't want to scare me, so he came by as a random stranger at my door. I almost fainted when I heard this. Was he a maniac? A psychopath who has followed me for a long time? No, he was my long-lost brother. What a turn of events. All my life, I believed that I was the only child. I never had anyone to share my secrets or even fight with. My parents were always spoiling me, as I was the only center of their attention. Can you imagine the emotions I went through when I heard this? A brother? A 24-year-old, tall and handsome brother. Anyhow, the story gets even more complicated. I finally decided to invite my brother inside. We were talking for 2 hours, but he didn't want to share the story of how we were related, at least not until my parents came home. I could notice the confusion on his face. He thought I knew I had a brother. That's why he wanted to wait for my parents, or should I say, our parents. 2 cappuccinos later, my mom and my dad finally arrived at midnight. May I remind you that there was a stranger in our living room? It was obvious that my parents didn't even know who he is. Their first assumption was that he was my boyfriend, and oh my gosh, here we go again. My protective father always felt the need to defend me against the male kind. At the end of the day, I was his little princess. So I can understand the reasons for his actions. He was about to fight my brother when he said, "Stop it, you know who I am. I am about to tell her." Long story short, we all managed to calm our frustration and sat on the couch. Suddenly, my mom started crying. I have never been more confused in my entire life. She said, "I hope that what we are about to tell you won't make you love or appreciate us less." I assumed that they gave my brother for adoption and they didn't want me to judge them. I instantly developed my theory that they were young and panicked. Apparently, I was about to forgive them. But believe me, when I say I was far from the truth. My mom was stuttering. Still, she wanted to be the one that reveals the whole story. She began by telling me about her pregnancy with me. She didn't even mention my long-lost brother. When I asked her why she is skipping that part, she answered, "You will understand." Apparently, there was an earthquake on the day when I was born. Can you guess how this justifies my newly discovered brother? Well, neither could I. To be more specific, I was born in our local hospital. My mother was struggling for days before I decided to come out. Obviously, I was indecisive even in the womb. It's a characteristic of mine that explains many actions I have taken in my life. Anyway, I was born in June. On this particular day, 16 other babies were born in the same hospital. It's not many, but as I said, it's a small town. And I should be lucky that there weren't more babies at the moment. I know it sounds confusing, but you will understand when I finish the story. During the conversation, my mom told me, as you already know, all babies look alike. Can you imagine my shock at the moment? My own mother couldn't tell me apart. Did they switch me with another baby in the hospital? And does this explain my long-lost brother? Well, I wish it did, but the reality was far worse. When my mother gave birth to me, she held me in her hands. Like any other mother, she wanted to smell me, to hug me and hold me tight. My father was right beside her during the whole journey. They were thrilled that they had a daughter. All their lives, they dreamed of having a girl. That's why I am as spoiled as I am. They truly gave me everything I ever wished for, from the fanciest clothes to the most expensive toys. But that's not what makes my parents special. They have always listened to me, dedicated their time and full attention to my concerns. And my mom and dad love me unconditionally, and they always will. So what could have happened on my birthday to make my mother so anxious? Is there anything that can stop me from loving them for a lifetime? Back to the story. My mother had to give me to the medical nurses. Then I was placed together with the other babies. This is the usual hospital procedure, so I still couldn't spot the problem. But as I mentioned before, there was an earthquake at the hospital. The important fact is that everyone survived this disaster. There were no victims in the accident. Well, except the sacrifice of the truth. I and the rest of the 16 babies were tangled together and transferred to a safe place. The issue is that the hospital didn't keep good track of our identities. There weren't any available DNA tests at the moment, so they decided to keep this as a secret. For years, the parents weren't aware of this issue. All that time, they believed that the hospital gave them their baby. More specifically, there were 10 female and 7 male newborn babies. After a few years, the truth came out. But it was already too late. The parents have developed strong relationships with their children. My parents didn't want to put me through such a stressful situation from a young age. After all, they loved me as I am their own blood, even if I was not. As shocking as it sounds, I was then made aware that I have 10 mothers. Both my mom and my dad burst into tears. My mother started cursing my new brother. She started yelling and asking why he came. She was 100% convinced that I will blame them or even leave them as complete strangers. But she was wrong. I didn't blame my parents, not even for a second. I was just shocked by this new information. Can you imagine finding out that you have 9 more mothers, 9 more fathers, and a whole bunch of brothers and sisters? Of course, I am speaking hypothetically. I know that I can only have one mother and one father. But who are they? Are they the people I have been living with my whole life? Or are they people from a different culture, individuals with other values and daily habits? No matter the case, I wanted to meet them. I cannot imagine what my mom and dad were feeling at that moment. Maybe they thought that I would leave them for my real parents. Little did they know, I have always seen them as my only family. Now, back to the story of my long-lost brother. I'm sure that you are questioning why he was looking for me. His adventure began when he met a girl at the same age as his sister, or the girl he was living with. At this stage, we're unaware of who is related and who is not. When he met the girl, he instantly felt a connection. They started talking and bonding. After a while, he discovered that she was born on the same date and in the same hospital as his sister. It was simply too big of a coincidence. He spent months on research and he came upon the hospital's secret. Then he decided to face his parents with the truth. He asked them whether the girl living with him was truly his relative. Even though this was a well-kept secret, his parents decided to reveal the story. Like my parents, they were also introduced to the problem several years after my birth. It was at that particular moment when my brother promised to spread the truth to all 17 babies. He didn't want to participate in this huge manipulation, so instead of keeping us in the dark, he was dedicated to uniting us all. Allegedly, I was the 8th girl baby on his list. He tracked us all and had this difficult conversation with each family. It is little to say that he was our hero. However, I cannot explain how I felt at the moment. It was honestly chaos of emotions. I felt anger, sadness, happiness, but ultimately I was thankful for the truth. But what path should I have chosen? I couldn't decide whether to ignore the facts or go looking for my biological parents. I was 20 years old, and I had no idea who I was, where I come from, And who are my parents? These past 3 months have been a roller coaster of emotions. Now, you're asking yourself why I didn't immediately take a DNA test. It sounds really simple, but you wouldn't feel that way if you were in my shoes. My parents weren't the only ones who were frightened of the truth. I thought that once they discover that I'm not their child, they would abandon me. At the moment, I was scared of reality. It was easier to ignore the issue and live in a world of my own. However, there is an end to every fantasy. The ultimate question that determined my destiny was, what if I fell in love with a relative? What would happen if I met my long-lost brother on the street? Well, I would be unaware that we were associated with him. And at this age, one thing leads to another. No one can guarantee my safety if I choose to live in a bubble. So I decided to be brave. To discover my roots and true identity, I wanted to know which of the 10 women is my biological mother. I must admit, it wasn't easy taking the test. Both I and my parents went through a tough period, and you will not believe what I've discovered. My whole life was a lie. These people I have been living with for the past 20 years weren't my biological parents. This means that I may have a brother or a sister that I am unaware of. It was then that I knew I had to take action. I instantly called the brother that visited me. He had the contacts of most babies born in the local hospital on the same day, many of which made DNA tests and confirmed the relationship to their parents. Anyhow, he didn't manage to find all female babies. One of them was nowhere to be found. As lucky as I am, it was probably the baby I had been switched with. So, what was I supposed to do now? My parents were supportive of my actions. They wanted to meet their child as well. But as I mentioned before, my mother took this worse than I thought. She started struggling with anxiety and depression. Each day when I left the house to look for my biological mother, I felt that I was breaking her heart a little bit more. Each day that I came closer to the truth, I moved farther away from my mom. So once again, I had to choose. As people, we make numerous decisions each day. This is what makes us different. This is what builds our personality and overall image. Everyone says that as you age, you face more delicate decisions. As you age, your problems become bigger and your childhood concerns seem funny to you. Nonetheless, I never thought that my life would turn into a tragedy of this type. I never thought that reality may be as harsh as mine. You wouldn't believe what I have discovered. I was searching for a long time. I went to the hospital. I went through all town records and social networks. I did everything in my power to find my family. I wanted to meet the girl that has been living my life for the past 20 years. I wanted to see what I have missed and what I have taken from her. Finally, I got a call from the local police. And yes, I have involved them in my case as well. Ultimately, they have found my family. I had an open conversation with my mom. I told her that she will always have a special place in my heart. She has and will forever remain my mother. In the end, she understood why I had to take this step. So we decided to go to the police together. We were both ready to face the truth. We thought that the story couldn't get worse, but when we got to the police, we heard the most heartbreaking event of a lifetime. Both my biological mother and the girl I had been switched with were in an accident 3 years ago. It was reported to the police, and that's how they tracked them. I think you already understand the disastrous end of my narrative. They were dead. The girl who has been living my life was no longer alive. I, the one that took her place, was living a fairy tale. My whole life, I got everything I wanted. I had the best parents and most supportive friends. Should I be grateful that I was switched in the hospital? Or should I blame myself for taking her place? Both I and my mother lost a part of ourselves when we heard the news. We got home and told everything to my father. He couldn't accept the truth as well. After all, their daughter was dead. It will take years for us to return to our regular lives. We will never be able to forget about the family members we didn't get to meet. When it comes to my biological father, I will meet him in the future. At this moment, I'm not ready to reach out to him and his new family. After all, he may not even know that I exist. I will take the time to reconnect with the people who have raised me. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if we have the same blood or not. They made me who I am. So, they are my family.